Hey, hi students. Today we will see the fourth part of nationalism in India. In first three lectures, we discussed about non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. Who were in which territory, which kind of ideas the people had in their mind about non-cooperation movement that we discussed. What activities were done in activities exactly were done in non-cooperation movement that we discussed. uh, what was the series of civil disobedience movement exactly, it how happened, what was the intention behind it, and what the participants did in that movement, that also we had discussed. Okay, what was the Gandhi Irwin Pact? Okay, and why Gandhi ji called off non-cooperation movement also, and civil disobedience movement also, all we have discussed, isn't it, in our earlier lectures. So now let's start our fourth lecture on nationalism in India. In last lecture, we have finished this slide, isn't it? As I told you earlier, Gandhiji kept 11 demands in front of Irwin. What were those 11 demands? I have brought that page here for you. The most important was this one, 11th one, abolish salt tax. That is most important for us. You know why it was most important? Because it is related to common man. If you see other 10 demands, everyone are not concerned with these demands, isn't it? But 11th demand, that is about abolish salt tax, it is related to everyone. Everybody is going to get affected if you are going to levy the tax on salt, isn't it? So that's why Gandhiji understood this, and he just put his finger on this salt tax. And using this protest against salt tax, Gandhiji attracted many people. They came and participated in civil disobedience movement. But still, for your knowledge, you can see here these were the 11 demands. Okay, you can read it out. Okay, chalo, fine. Now let's move towards our next topic. Here you can see some pictures. This is the picture of Dandi March. You can see how the people are going with Gandhiji. Okay, here you can see how the people are doing procession, and this is photo of second round table conference. See here Gandhiji is sitting. Okay, from this you can imagine how much voltage this meeting had. Okay, how high, highly qualified and high level officials were present there, and Gandhiji was, as you can see, he is sitting in our Indian attire, and all others are sitting in suit and boot. But still Gandhiji never kept his principle aside, and these all people, they had to be flexible with Gandhiji, because they know very well that until and unless we convince Gandhiji, the people of India, they will not get convinced. From this we will imagine how much Gandhiji had weightage at that time. Okay, yes. So in our third part, this is second sub part of our lesson, how participants saw the movement. As you know, there were many participants, those who joined this movement. Okay, so here in this part we are going to discuss about five participants. What was their idea about nationalism, what was their idea about Swaraj, okay, and why they participated in this movement. So first of them was Patidars and Jats. As you know very well, they are being producers of commercial crops. They were very hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. As their cash income disappeared, they found it impossible to pay the government's revenue demand, and the refusal of the government to reduce the revenue demand led to widespread resentment. And keeping this in their mind, that we are going to fight against these laws in civil disobedience movement. That's why they joined civil disobedience movement. But as I told you earlier, their demand was not completed. Okay, Gandhiji just put his 11 demands, and these people, their demand was not completed. As you know, there was, when Gandhiji went for second round table conference, when he came back, there was another cycle of preparation, isn't it? So at that time their demands were not completed. Still Gandhiji called off the movement, and that was the problem with these people. Second, you can see they were poorer peasants. Okay, these people, they wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. How is it possible? Okay, what was their demand? They wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. They joined a variety of radical movements, often led by socialists and communists. As I told you earlier, it was considered that this whole land is owned by the king. Okay, means Britishers, and they have given this land on lease, on rent to the people, and these people, they have to pay the rent to government. But because of failure of crops, because of famine, they were not able to pay these taxes. So they wanted that their rent should be remitted, and keeping this in their mind, they joined civil disobedience movement. As it was not completed, ultimately they were going towards socialism and communism. As you know very well, in socialism and communism, peasants are at highest peak. You have to distribute the property among all, isn't it? That is the principle of socialism. Everybody should be rich, or everybody should be on same equal level. So they were always moving towards radical movements and going towards socialist and communist ideologies. Apprehensive of raising issues that might upset the rich peasants and landlords, the Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaign in most places. Here you can see there were many landlords in Congress. Okay, and they were thinking, if we are going to give the remission or remittance to the demand of these people, if you give the approval, then the landlords, those who are present in Congress or those who are supporting the Congress, they will be disappointed. That's why Congress never gave attention towards these poor people, and that's why the relation between the poor peasants and the Congress, it always remained uncertain. Okay. Third participant was business classes. During World War I, these people made huge profit. Okay, and that's why they got the confidence and they wanted to expand their business. They were keen to expand. But while expanding this, they wanted protection against imports of foreign goods and rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio. As you know, there is a foreign exchange ratio between various countries of the countries. Various currencies of the countries. For example, I'm not sure about it, but I think it is approximately here and there. $1 is equal to 70 rupees, isn't it? So this is foreign exchange ratio. And if we are losing the importance of rupee day by day, then the sterling will be more heavy in the market, and that's why we will not get that much benefit. So these people wanted that it should be in control. If uncontrolled sterling rates are increasing, then they will not get the benefit. That's why they wanted protection against imports of foreign goods and rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio. And why they wanted protection against imports of foreign goods? See, if we are importing maximum things in our India, then the people will prefer those commodities which are imported from other countries, because they are cheap one, isn't it? So that's why they wanted protection, and the people will not take from these people. People will not purchase from this businessman. That's why they wanted protection against imports of foreign goods. So these were two demands, and keeping this in their mind, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, FICCI, in 1927. It was led by prominent industrialists like Purushottam Das Thakur Das and G.D. Birla, very well-known personalities. The industrialists attacked colonial control over the Indian economy, and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched. See, it is first launch. When Gandhiji came back from second roundtable conference, as I told you earlier, it had lost its momentum because self-interest of all these five groups of the people, it was not fulfilled. And see, these five groups, I have kept here three. Two groups will come in our next slide. So they are only representatives. Okay, so their demands were not fulfilled, and that's why they were not keen to join civil disobedience movement again. That's why CDM lost its momentum. So after failure of roundtable conference, they were apprehensive of the spread of militant activities and worried about prolonged disruption of business. Because of civil disobedience movement, there was disruption in their business. That's why again they were not willing to join the movement. And second reason was socialism. Influence of socialism was growing amongst the younger members of the Congress. Do you know who are these younger members? They are Subhash Chandra Bose and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. You must be knowing about it, that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, they were inclined towards socialism, and that's why when we got independence and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was first Prime Minister of India, we were getting maximum help from Russia first. Okay, and we were not having good relation with America. You know why? Because as India was tending towards Russia was a socialist country and America was capitalist country. That's why America was not willing to give any help to India, because they were thinking that India, as inclining towards socialism, one day it will also become a socialist country. Okay, let it be. So that's why these people, as they saw socialism was growing in Congress amongst younger leaders, they were not willing to join civil disobedience movement again. But the question arises, what the problem if the socialism is spreading in Congress, isn't it? Because the ideology of socialism is completely against the capitalism. See, every businessman, every merchant, he wants to do his business to earn money, isn't it? He wants to earn money, he wants to accumulate that money. But in this process, socialism says that only one person should not have all wealth. It should be distributed equally amongst the society. And if it is distributed, how one man is going to be rich, isn't it? He will not become rich if it is so. And that's why capitalism dislike socialism. Okay, they can never sit in same row. Okay, chalo, fine. So we have discussed about these three participants. Okay, next, fourth participant was industrial working class. Okay, as the industrialists came closer to the Congress, workers stayed aloof, selectively adopting some of the ideas of the Gandhian program, like boycott of foreign goods, as part of their own movements against low wages and poor working conditions. These industrial working class people, their demand was only two. First, low wages, and they should get high wages. Earlier it was low wages. And second, their demand was there should be a good working condition. Earlier it was poor working condition. Okay, in Russia also it happened now. Last year we discussed about it. And that's why again for these demands there were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and dock workers in 1932. In 1930, thousands of workers in Chota Nagpur tin mines wore Gandhi caps and participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. But the Congress was reluctant to include workers' demand as part of its program of struggle. It felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide the anti-imperial forces. Again, see, in our earlier slide, we saw that congressmen, they never paid that much attention to the peasants because they never wanted to disappoint or to dissatisfy whom? Industrialists. and landlords. Same like that, they also didn't want to pay that much attention to this industrial working class, because they never wanted to disappoint industrialist. Okay, chalo fine. Next, fifth, women. Yes, you know, somewhere, not exactly, but somewhere, the ideology of Gandhiji and Hitler regarding women, it was same. You will be shocked by listening this, but it is fact. Hitler also used to think that home and hearth should be maintained by women. Same like that, Gandhiji also used to think. And see, it was nothing like giving them less importance. Okay, naturally, biologically, they have got this uh, ability. Only they can do it. Okay, that's why during Gandhiji's Salt March, but still, during Gandhiji's Salt March, thousands of women came out of their homes to listen to him. They participated in protest marches, manufactured salt, and picked foreign cloth and liquor shops, and many went to jail. In urban areas, okay, these women were from high caste families, and in rural areas, they came from rich peasants' households. Service to the nation as a sacred duty of women, they considered. Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home and hearth. Here you can see. He used to think that be good mothers and good wives. And for a long time, the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. It was keen only on their symbolic presence. You know, Congress was thinking that means Congress never gave them that much importance in assembly and council also. Okay, only they wanted their nominal presence, symbolic presence. Okay, so in this way, these were 5 participants. But do you think only these 5 participants were there in civil disobedience movement? Absolutely not. There were many participants, but as a representative we have taken here only 5. Okay, so there were many participants in civil disobedience movement, but those who were disappointed from this movement, we have taken their example here. As you know, when Gandhiji kept his 11 demands in front of Lord Irwin, he accepted it, but he also kept his one condition in front of Gandhiji, that he has to attend second roundtable conference. Gandhiji accepted that. He went to roundtable conference, but when he was the second roundtable conference was failed. When he came back, he saw there was another cycle of repression of political leaders by Britishers, and that's why he thought that again we will relaunch the movement. He relaunched also, but till 1935 it lost its momentum, because the people, those who joined the movement, all of them, they didn't get whatever they wanted from this CDM. Okay, chalo fine. So here we will see the main limitations of the civil disobedience movement. Dalits did not participate in CDM because the Congress did not give importance to their demands. What was the reason? Separate electorate. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Do you remember? Pune Pact. If you don't remember, let me recall you. Baba Sahib Ambedkar went to Gandhiji to meet him, as he was in, I don't remember the name of that jail now. Okay, let it be. So he went there to Gandhiji as Gandhiji was fasting. Baba Sahib Ambedkar was asking for separate electorate. Already I have explained you what is separate electorate. Okay, but Gandhiji was firm on this, that he will not give separate electorate. We can give them reservation. And finally, in Pune Pact, it is decided that Dalits will not get separate electorate, but they will get reservation in that territory for contesting election. Okay, and their demand was not fulfilled. That's why they were not keen to attend civil disobedience movement. Okay, next. Many Muslims did not participate in it. You know why? Because they thought that the Congress was moving close to the Hindu Mahasabha. Earlier in non-cooperation movement was going hand in hand with Khilafat movement. That's why many Muslims they also joined non-cooperation movement. But in civil disobedience movement, Congress leaders they were inclining towards Hindu Mahasabha, and Muslim people, as they are in minority, they were thinking that it is a threat to us. That's why they were not willing to join civil disobedience movement. And the communal riots occurred in many places, and that's why there was disunity between Hindus and Muslims started. Industrial workers' participation was minimum. So in this way, these were the main limitations of the civil disobedience movement. Dalits, Muslims and industrial workers. Yeah. So till here we have finished our third part of the lesson. Okay. Now we will start our fourth part of the lesson, which is very easy. Some symbols are given here which express nationalism. Okay. Sense of collective belonging. First of them is Bharat Mata. It was in the, see, you can see picture here. This picture definitely Bharat is just a land, it's just a territory. How it can become a portrait like this, isn't it? But it's an imagination. As we know, God is everywhere, but still we have framed it and we have kept it as an idol in the temple, isn't it? But God is everywhere. Same like that, India is a country, but you have to give some symbol to it so that we will feel that it is one of us. And Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay was pioneer in doing this. It was in the 20th century with the growth of nationalism that the identity of India came to be visually associated with the image of Bharat Mata. 1870s, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay he wrote Vande Mataram as a hymn to motherland. Later, it was included in his novel Anandamath and widely sung during the Swadeshi movement in Bengali, very famous song, Vande Mataram. Moved by the Swadeshi movement, Abhanindranath Tagore painted his famous image of Bharat Mata. So, in our next slide, you will see there are two images of Bharat Mata. This first one is drawn by Abhanindranath Tagore, and after this you can see this figure of Bharat Mata is contrast to the painted by Abhanindranath Tagore. Here she is shown with Trishul standing beside a lion and an elephant. Means you will understand from this that once this idea was introduced by Bankim Chattopadhyay ji, okay, afterwards it was modified again and again, time to time, as per the requirement of the time. Okay, so first Bharat Mata, second Indian folklore. Folklore's songs play very vital role. Okay, late 19th century, it was beginning of folklore folktale collection. What was the incentive behind it? Many Indians they were thinking that we were having a very glorious history, but it was damaged by Britishers, and until and unless we introduce the people with this glorious history, they will not get self-confidence, they will not have self-esteem, they will consider themselves as inferior in front of Britishers. So that we have to collect all these things, only then our glorious history will come back. To discover one's national identity and restore a sense of pride in one's past, how glorious we were. To express that, they collected these folklores. Rabindranath Tagore himself began collecting ballads, nursery rhymes and myths, and led movement for folk revival. In Madras also, Natesa Shastri published a massive four-volume collection of Tamil folk tales. The name of it, The Folklore of Southern India. He believed that folklore was national literature. It was the most trustworthy manifestation of people's real thoughts and characteristics. And third is tricolor flag. If you see, all our soldiers, they are fighting for this flag. Practically, if you think, it is just a piece of cloth, isn't it? But all our emotions and sentiments, feelings, all they are attached to this small piece of cloth. Okay, for this cloth people die, and that is the significance of this tricolor flag. But how it is developed, let's see. You can see here in 1906, it was the tricolor flag of India, color red, green and yellow. There are 8 lotuses you can see here, 1 2 3 4 5 8. Okay, they are representing 8 provinces of British India. Here you can see crescent moon, okay, which represents Muslim, and here the sun, which represents Hinduism. So unity of Hinduism and Muslim. Okay, in 1921, Gandhiji's flag of 3 colors was red, green and white. One new color is introduced here, that is white, which is the symbol of peace, and in middle of that there is spinning jenny, spinning wheel, which represents self independence. Okay, and finally this is our current flag, as you know. Okay, there is no need to give any explanation for such a glorious tricolor flag. Okay, and in national movements, carrying the flag, holding it aloft during marches become a symbol of defiance. People started dying for these flags. And here, the last one, history. The British saw Indians as backward and primitive, incapable of governing themselves. In response, Indians began looking into the past to discover India's great achievements. When art and architecture, science and mathematics, religion and culture, law and philosophy, crafts and trade had flourished. As I told you earlier, we had a glorious history when art and architecture. If you go to South India, you will see what is the art and architecture. Meenakshi temple. Okay, such a big temples are there. Such a beautiful art our people had. Science and mathematics. Aryabhatta. It is also said nowadays that Aryabhatta in his Saura Siddhanta, he has already calculated the distance between the earth and the sun at that time, and it is exactly near to the current distance between sun and the earth. This much exact calculation we had in past. Religion and culture, law and philosophy, crafts and trade had flourished. Then there was a history of decline when Mughals invaded, then Britishers invaded, French, Portuguese, all they invaded. And if you really want to kill someone's self-esteem, you have to kill his past. Britishers knew it very well, and that's why they started writing the history by in their own eyes. These nationalist histories urged the leaders to take pride in India's great achievements in the past and struggle to change the miserable conditions of life under British rule. And that's why our people started researching our real history. Okay, chalo, fine, thank you so much. Here we finish our lesson. If you have any queries, you can write in comment box. Okay, thank you so much. Have a nice day.